Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Thrive Co-Living Communities podcast. Glad to have you back, whether you're on YouTube watching us or listening on your favorite podcast station. Glad to have you back. Today, I have Nico Nelson, who has a company, Unbridled Spirits Consulting. He has a deep and wide background in the spirits industry, and we met in a networking opportunity, and I was just so fascinated with everything that he shared. I immediately wanted to bring him on, and about 10 minutes in, I was sorry that we were not recording the podcast because it's just great stuff. But so, um, we have different distinctions with this podcast now, and I put Nick or Nico in the category of passion. So this is a Thrive Passion episode. He certainly has awesome qualifications, but he seems just incredibly passionate about the craft. So, Nick, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Thanks so much, Mark. Appreciate you having me.
So, let's start it from a uh, passion perspective. What led to your passion for spirits? Which ones grab you the most, and how did it all begin?
Well, I was very fortunate career-wise to work with uh, an international supplier, Brown-Forman Corporation, for 23 years or so, which, my background was in finance, was in sales, marketing, route to consumer. I touched all components of the sales and marketing continuum. I'm a born and raised Kentuckian, so I've always been around the bourbon industry. Uh, Even in my college days, I had a little uh, consumer, I guess, what I'll call research back in college. So I just loved the business, and was blessed with working for a company that allowed me to grow as an individual within the industry. Like I said, I started in internal audit on the finance side, and then became an analyst, and then fell in love with the idea of sales and marketing. They allowed me to progress all the way to a national brand management position with Woodford Reserve Bourbon and Distillery, which that's a well-known brand nationally and actually internationally now. And then I got some global experience with a vodka brand by the name of Finlandia Vodka. Um, and then spent a lot of time working with our distributor partners, our retail partners, on how do we optimize the best way to sell it. And then upon retiring or taking early retirement, I just loved the business. And I started studying kind of the craft spirits industry, which is, these small up and comers that have become an $80 billion business these days. And there's over 2,000 craft distillers out in the US today. And they're there to compete. And they're everything from rum to bourbon to vodka. They're doing gin. They're doing all sorts of great things in the craft world. Everything from startups to fully established brands, and that are well distributed across the U.S. Some are local, some are regional. And given my background, I thought I'd love to just stay involved and help these visionaries and these real passionate guys that are trying to bring their brands to life, because I think my diverse background really could benefit them. So it's been great to stay involved and learn more about craft. As I mentioned, I tended to focus on the Brown-Forman portfolio when I was with them, and had no idea what was going on in the craft world, and until about 2 years ago, when I started really studying it and learning and seeing the growth. And the growth has been, I guess, very significant over the last many years, to where some of the bigger suppliers are starting to acquire these smaller craft spirits so they can play in the game. So it's, from a business standpoint, from a category standpoint, from an industry standpoint, it's been very interesting to learn, all the different components of it. So I'm here to help anybody that has passion, vision to bring their brand vision to life. So, and that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 18 months or so.
Did the craft spirits industry follow the craft beer industry? Is it lagging, or not lagging behind, but was it the success of craft beers that led people into craft spirits, or did they develop at around the same time?
Actually, from my experience, I think craft beer has a little bit longer life than craft spirits. And but it's similar passions, right? People are looking for great, authentic stories, full flavor, authentic, and actually sense of discovery type brands, whether it's beer or spirits. They have a lot of similarities that the folks that get involved and start it have a massive passion for what they're trying to do, whether it's brewing beer or creating great spirit brands, whether it's, from a brand development standpoint or actually get involved with actually owning a physical distillery and going from there. It's been interesting to watch. But to your point, I think spirits probably followed suit to beer.
And I think you said in our first conversation that you did a deep dive into craft beer, didn't you?
Well, it was more
Or am
craft spirits. It was more craft spirits just because here in Kentucky,
Okay.
the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, obviously the tourism is massive, and you're seeing a lot of really great brands from a craft perspective. Peerless, Wilderness Trail, Rabbit Hole. And just here in Louisville, there's a handful of craft distilleries that have popped up to really take advantage of the opportunity. And so I've basically started touring a lot of these sites and facilities, and several of my former colleagues have been involved with Rabbit Hole as well as Peerless. Copper and Kings is another one. It's had a lot of success nationally. Bardstown Bourbon Company in Bardstown is doing phenomenal work. So just really studying kind of the local opportunities. And then as I continued, I expanded my horizons and started learning about folks that were doing great things in Colorado, Utah, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New York. So craft distilling is, a U.S. phenomena. Regardless what people say, it doesn't have to be made in Kentucky to be bourbon. It can be made anywhere as long as it's following the rules of bourbon. So,
yeah, now that crosses against something that I've always heard, that it had to be bourbon, it had to be Kentucky because of the spring water. So you're dispelling that for us?
You can get spring water. I mean, water's a great source of flavor. And there's plenty of limestone water in other markets. Pennsylvania used to be a hub of, great distilling back in the pre-prohibition days. Illinois as well, but because they had access to clean spring water as well as great corn and great grains and processes. Kentucky has become the predominant state. I think I read somewhere 95% of Kentucky's or U.S. bourbons made out of Kentucky. But that doesn't mean you can't make great bourbon in other parts of the country.
But the key is then the water, good spring water. And what would be the difference between bourbon and whiskey other than the spelling of the name?
Well, so if you break away from the 5 rules of bourbon, or I guess there's 5 or 6, but one being typically if you're not aged in new oak barrels, you become a whiskey. If you're not distilled at over, I think it's, or under 160 proof and the barreled at 125 proof, that qualifies as a whiskey. So I think that, those are 2 predominant ones. But to be a true bourbon, you've got to use new oak barrels and be distilled at certain levels to be qualified as a bourbon. So unique distinction. A lot of consumers don't know the difference. A lot of the entrepreneurs and experts certainly know the difference.
So, what are the most exciting things going on in the industry, whether it be spirits, beer, um, the major brands? What are some of the things that excite you as you read industry uh, magazines and websites?
Well, I mean, just all the innovation that's going on. Again, whether it's the secondary aging process, whether it's bourbon, what I'll call bourbon blending. You've got several brands out there that either have distilled their own spirit and then have sourced another type of spirit. Different mash bills. Whether it's a wheated mash bill, a rye mash bill. They've been blending those and just delivering great flavors. And then some of the packaging that's out there is very premium. In the world of kind of what I'll call the beer world, or RTD, ready to drink, which are more of the convenience packages, you're seeing this proliferation of the seltzers, right? You're seeing a lot of the Trulies and the White Claws. You're seeing a lot of innovation in that space with Cutwater Spirits. That's actually an spirit-based, ready-to-drink brand, and it's like premixed cocktails, right? So premixed cocktails have become really popular. That's a trend that's ebbed and flowed over the years with malt-based beverages. When you think about Smirnoff Ice, you think about Mike's Hard Lemonade. Those have been around for a long time, but then there's been this resurgence because of the wellness trends with millennials, the convenience trends with millennials wanting unique flavors, and so there's all sorts of innovation out there to watch and see and experiment. I get introduced to new brands about once a week, just looking around to see what's out there. High Noon is a real popular tequila-based spirit convenience package these days. It's real big. In the spirits world, back to, you're seeing rum and gin. Vodkas, there's a lot of vodkas being produced out there, but those tend to be revenue sources for some of these small distilleries. But just to see the real innovations that are happening around, the whiskey arm has been great to watch, and it's a trend that's going to be there for a while. But like I said, the larger suppliers, the Diageo, Pernod Ricards, Brown Formans of the world are acquiring these innovative craft distillers because the consumers today are looking for unique, authentic, sense of discovery, great flavor, great packaging type brand experiences. That's what consumers are looking for today, is just a real positive experience with a brand. Brand loyalty is not as strong as it used to be, so people are there or out and about, kind of sampling and trying new and different categories across rum, bourbon, vodka, ready to drinks. So it's been really fascinating to watch and see how that's evolved in just probably the last 5 years.
Do you think there'll be a consolidation in the industry, sort of like the Cokes and Pepsis that bought out teas, and they kept adding to their portfolio? And do you think that would be a detriment to the innovation, or do you think there are just too many of them out there that the new ones will keep being spawned as long as there's money chasing it?
Innovation has been a major part of supplier portfolio development for years and years. I mean, if you go back and look at the vodka category where all the flavors used to come out, you've got different brands like Smirnoff and Three Olives. It came out with a new flavor once every few months, but they would have some core flavors that would stick. But this was a way to draw people into the brand, and whether the flavor lasted or not, it didn't matter. But you're seeing a lot of that today. Whiskeys have evolved into flavor innovations. You've got cinnamon whiskeys, you've got honey-based whiskeys, you've got apple. I mean, Crown. You look at some of the major brands out there, from Jack Daniels to Crown Royal, Jim Beam. They're all playing in that space. And a lot of it's to bring new consumers into the brand. So I think it's here to stay, innovation wise. But there always is proliferation, and then some brands make it, some don't. But there will be continual innovation because that's what consumers want. They want to try the latest trend and the newest flavor, and they're willing to experiment, especially the millennials, which is everybody's target. That's their MO. And I think the up and coming generations as well. My sons are all about trying new and different. So, and they're 20 somethings. So I think that's going to be here to stay. And it has been the case for a long time. Innovation really makes a big difference on that front. And from a consolidation sense, there's acquisitions. I just looked up today, in the last 2 years, there's probably been 20 plus acquisitions of different, whether brands, whether it's small distilleries by some of these larger players. Pernod Ricard's been active, Diageo's been active, Constellation Brands has been active in terms of acquiring some of these brands and taking them to the next level. Locally, Pernod Ricard recently made a major investment in Rabbit Hole Distillery, and they make great super premium whiskeys across the board. They even have a gin that's very good. That distillery started, I believe, in 2017. So it's fairly new, right? And I think you're going to continue to see that trend.
What about technology? Is technology changing? It's especially in the bourbons. It's been
absolutely it is
a long trend.
It's technology in a couple of ways. There's some production technologies that are out there in terms of some different ways that I think they're experimenting with accelerated aging processes to try to bring brands to market faster, especially in the bourbon world, right? Consumers are looking for full flavored whiskeys, and if there's a way to get those to market faster, that's the challenge of bourbon. People are bringing them to market from anywhere from 1.5 to 2 years to 4 years to 8 to 12. And the more character they get out of the barrel, the more flavor it delivers. So there's some technology enhancements there. It hasn't become the norm yet, but that doesn't mean it's not a future trend. Where I'm seeing the most impact on technology are these on-demand services like delivery services, e-commerce, which has helped. It exploded during the pandemic. Obviously, everybody was stuck at home and anxiety was probably very prevalent, and they used beverage alcohol to, I guess, settle their nerves, if that's the way to say it. But these delivery services started thriving. This one in particular by the name of Drizzly was recently purchased by Uber. And Drizzly, the best way to describe a Drizzly, it's very much like an Uber. It's an application on your phone that connects you to the local retail store, and they can deliver whatever you want in 30 minutes. That's their mantra, right? And all they are is a platform connecting you to a retail partner. And they have a website that lists all the items that are available and carried. And they were, as of 8 or 9 years ago, kind of testing the waters in some metropolitan markets. And now they've become, to my knowledge, very much a national presence. And if Uber's involved, it's going to be a pretty big advancement. And then e-commerce, you've got retailers who've developed their own websites that you can shop online and pick up if you need to do that. You've got direct to consumer websites that are out there, especially in the wine world. In participating markets, there are limitations there, but spirits has opened up more so recently, especially for craft. There's quite a few partners out there, whiskeylovers.com, the Bourboner, Reserve Bar, just to mention a few that, consumers can go online and just order it online and have it delivered, providing the local state, laws are allow that, right? So
that's been changing some too. I think in Kentucky, where states have loosened the restrictions during COVID, haven't they?
Well, I mean,
and that's not likely to go back.
No, there's legislature in place in Kentucky that I think it's going to allow Kentucky distillers to ship to more markets directly. It's great for the craft business if you think about it, right? So one of my clients, we're basically available at retail in Illinois, but we do a lot of social media, and reach consumers beyond Illinois. And we've gotten a lot of demand on, hey, how can I get it in North Carolina? How can I get it in Texas? And once we get our e-commerce up and running, we'll be able to fulfill those needs. The more sophisticated players, in the world of bigger suppliers, they're putting dedicated resources and talent against e-commerce. It's become like its own channel, if you will. So when I speak to channels in this business, you've got the on-premise, which is your bar, restaurant type accounts, and then you've got what we call the off-premise, which is the retailers, the Total Wines, the Bennies, the Walmarts, kind of the bigger players, plus your independent retail stores. But e-premise or e-channel is a whole new place to shop, and you can learn just as much about the brands. You can, as an example, a project I worked on at one point with Brown-Forman was we ran a program up in Boston and Jack Daniels where we would run Facebook ads with a buy now button. And so if it came across your phone, you could hit buy now, it would send you to Drizzly, and you could have something delivered to you in 30 minutes, theoretically, right? But as consumers have now gotten more comfortable with e-commerce and internet shopping, the opportunity is endless, especially in beverage alcohol. And I think when we were looking at that opportunity, beverage alcohol is probably one of the most underutilized categories in that space. I think something like only 4% of, or less than 4% of the sales were in that space. So there's just tons of growth opportunity, and you have to be very nimble and evolve your strategy. So it is up and coming for sure.
So talk about COVID a little bit. Obviously, it affected on-premises sales immediately, but what's it looking like now? I guess it depends on how the states are opening up, the areas are opening up. But overall, what did it do? Because in-home consumption probably skyrocketed, and I noticed politically there was no effort to put any sort of cap on the availability of alcohol for people. I think, by the government, and everything seemed to be geared towards keeping the spigots open so that people didn't get too angry about it. So what happened statistically with COVID?
So several things. Great question. So in the onset of COVID, obviously they were shutting down bars and restaurants to limit social gathering, to limit the spread, right? And so they took a major hit for a long, long time. But what was interesting, I don't know if it was officially deemed essential, but beverage alcohol became essential. So when you look at the trends on the consumer takeaway trends for the off-premise, the trends exploded. They were growing anywhere from 50 to 85% versus the prior year comps, because that's how people were getting their goods, and off-premise retailer outlets were not asked to close. And we all know that the big box retailers, certainly the Walmarts, the Krogers of the world, were essential, and even the big box liquor stores were essential. So you saw a lot more growth on that front. People learned at home entertaining, and obviously it's a very stressful time. So you saw acceleration in those trends. Unfortunately, not probably to the point of where it was break even, because there was so much loss in the on-premise. On average, most of the significant suppliers, or I'll say brands, not suppliers, they do about 20% of the business in the on-premise. Where it really hurt people were the beer side of it, right? Spirits is a little bit different. So all the keg sales totally stopped entirely. Craft beer certainly took a hit, much harder than anybody. Domestic beer and craft packaging and retail certainly grew. RTDs grew. Ready to drink. Sorry, I keep using that acronym. But during COVID, that was what happened, and what you saw in the craft world, a lot of these craft distillers required, or I guess got their bread and butter by people visiting their distillery, right? Well, that all stopped, so that hurt those folks. If you had a good distribution footprint at retail, you benefited, because what was the other thing that was interesting to watch was spirit premiumization, price mix. People were buying better, right? They were buying more high end. Which that's where the craft brands typically sit, right? They sit in the $40, $50, $60 range, some as high as $100, and they're $100 a bottle. And those brands thrived. It was really interesting to watch, because we watch the news every night and they talk about how bad the economy is. And you look at luxury goods, and luxury goods were doing just fine, which was a little bit of a interesting, I guess, phenomena to watch during COVID. Now that things are opening back up, we're watching the on-premise come back to a certain degree, very slowly, because again, as you watch the news, people are having hiring issues. People aren't returning to the workforce like they'd hoped. But in terms of total sales in the on-premise, they're still waning a little bit. But when you look at velocity, which is what I'll call your average speed of purchasing, that's actually accelerating right now. So that's favorable for the on-premise. You're seeing the off-premise still grow, but they're also going against difficult comps. So if you're looking at a year ago today, the business was in the off-premise on fire, and sales were accelerating, and now people are getting out and about and doing different things. And so if you look at a 1-year trend, the business is not as strong, but when you look at 2-year trends and 3-year trends, it's still unbelievable growth. I mean, I think I saw the business is still up, almost double digits in the retail part of the business, and over a 2-year period, 3-year period. It's so people are still, COVID is still with us. So there's still, I imagine, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, and beverage alcohol has been, a way to, as a social enhancer to, hopefully make people, I guess, deal with kind of their stress levels, if you will, to a certain extent. So those trends are still thriving, even somewhat post shutdown, because I would still say we're on the back end of the pandemic, but still have some issues depending on them.
Another part of it was that I don't think it ever happened before is restaurants were allowing people to take wine bottles of wine, purchase that, and that helped their sales, especially when they were just doing carry out only.
Right.
And I'd never seen that happen before.
Yeah, but beverages to go, right? Which in normal circumstances, that was not the case. But because carryout became a major way to help these restaurants stay open and thrive during the shutdown, and I think consumers started demanding, hey, I'd love a big margarita to go with my, my Mexican fare. And there was such a demand that started to be considered. And I believe here in Kentucky, they opened it up. And what's interesting is that conversation is still going on, even though things are, these restaurants are starting to open up. I've seen articles here and there is, are drinks to go still going to be a trend? Is that still a possibility? I think we've proven that if we do it responsibly and, we're not cracking those beverages as soon as we get in the car, and we do take them home and enjoy them, right? That's the big issue. You're going to have some folks that are going to go against this, but if that's a revenue source, and it'll be interesting to watch for sure.
I see so many areas, and the people that we're interviewing here on the podcast share so many examples of trends that were already happening that accelerate due to COVID. And it sounds like there's several of them in the spirits industry, and they're not going back. Like Zoom meetings. I think people are going to be excited at first to get back to networking meetings and business meetings in person, and then I think pretty soon the newness is going to wear off, and people are going, boy, it sure was nice not to have that 45-minute commute each way, and I'm stopping for my dry cleaning, and I've got a half a day invested in a 1-hour coffee meeting. So I think that's one trend, and sounds like there are a lot there in your industry.
Yeah, I agree. So the convenience of a Zoom meeting, and case in point, I was trying to schedule a meeting with a brewery I'm working with and a marketing agency I'm working with, and I wanted to get them in the same room to collaborate, and they just, because of their schedules, they're like, well, can we just do a Zoom? I'm like, well, I guess. More meetings, certain meetings are more effective in person, but that's a convenience play as well. I think people also, because of COVID and the pandemic, and just how horrible it's been, people's values have changed. I think they are taking a lighter look at life. They don't want to be working 24/7, and their lifestyles have changed, and I think that's going to be long term. It's going to be the 9-to-5 work week or work day. Sorry, I think it's going to look a lot different, and I think you're seeing that also in the trends as well.
Mm-hmm. I've known several people that worked at Brown-Forman, and it sounds like people would joke with them about it being a party atmosphere, but from the stories I've heard, it really was, or still is. Talk about working for a major distillery. Also, drop some other names of the brands for people outside of Kentucky. Drop some of the other brand names that Brown-Forman provides, and then tell us what it's like, the expense account when you go out to be able to buy it for yourself or others. What's it like to be even an executive, not just a salesperson, at a major distributor like that?
Yeah, well, the great thing about working for Brown-Forman, it's predominantly family owned, even though it's publicly traded, and it was very much about family and all about developing their people. I mean, my personal story is a great example. I used to tell people I'm the poster child of of what kind of company Brown-Forman is, because who gets to come in at internal audit and evolve his career and get involved in direct sales, distributor management up in the Northeast, be able to come back and run one of the best brands in the country today with Woodford Reserve and then Finlandia vodka, and then I'll just get a great diverse experience. It's great. It is a bit of a family environment because we work a lot, we play a lot, enjoy, because it's the nature of our industry, right? And so when you represent Jack Daniels and you're representing Herradura tequila and you're representing Old Forester, which is the family brand that was started in 1870, there's just a lot of family pride to those brands. And the environment is, we put in a lot of long hours, and because in the sales world, you would work with your distributors during the day, and then you would go out to bars and restaurants and support your retail partners there. And it was a lifestyle. That's the way I would call it. It wasn't necessarily a job. It was a lifestyle, because even when you weren't on the clock, you take your family out, and first thing you did was what we call the back bar scan and look for your brands to make sure they were in distribution or well presented. And, and then you take a note, and, if you had an opportunity, you would let your sales folks know. And it didn't matter. I traveled all over with Brown-Forman. It didn't matter, whether it was traveling with my family or traveling for the company. I did the same thing everywhere I went, because I wanted to advocate for my brands, because I believed in, everything they offer. Again, our portfolio has evolved over time. We're not only a whiskey portfolio today, but we have great tequilas with Herradura and El Jimador. We've got some good cordials with Chambord. We want to make sure that brand was out there. Sonoma-Cutrer is our biggest wine brand today. We have Corbel, which is a sparkling wine. So it's, there's a lot of, just enjoyment there, because it's a social business, right? The business is all about relationships. One example I always tell people, and I said this last week to one of my clients, I said, we're all here to make money off that one bottle of Jack Daniels, right? From a supplier standpoint, from a distributor standpoint, to a retail standpoint. So why wouldn't you, build a good relationship and do it well together? And for the most part, that's what we try to do, is build a solid relationship as a supplier with our distributor partners across the country, who then in turn, want to help us out. And then we also build strong relationships with retail partners. Because again, at the end of the day, if they're not selling, our brands, nobody's making money, if that makes sense, right? So given that it's a relationship, and then working for Brown-Forman family culture, it was very enjoyable.
We think about the Mad Men days back in the 60s, and then probably, except for the senior executive suite or close to it, probably most offices, executive offices, lower level offices, aren't decked out with bottles and bottles of spirits in a cabinet. But I get the impression that everybody at Brown-Forman, if you had an office, you were going to have a liquor cabinet. And how did you decide whose office to go to after hours for a drink? The ones that were the most fun, told the best jokes?
Well, I think it just it depended on what the opportunity was and who you wanted to go speak to. Everybody was proud of their brands and put them on display in their offices. The early years of Brown-Forman, I would hear stories about the bourbon lunches and the happy hours that were going on. But in recent years, social responsibility was probably was the proper trend, so that we were a little more limited on enjoying our products while at work. if you will. But Brown-Forman had a policy, and they have a dining location on site called the Bourbon Street Cafe, and they actually, you on policy could order a drink at lunch. They offered, the waiters would even offer you a drink, and it was kind of a drink of the day, and which that was pretty much the limit to it. In recent years, they want you to be more productive. And personally, if I had one of those long lunches where we were having a couple of bourbons, my productivity would have gone down quite a bit. So, but yeah, we've keep it quite social. And I'm not saying there wasn't a rare occasion that we would crack in a bottle that might have been on our desk, given how proud we were for our brands.
Cool. So I just looked at myself for the first time, and I look like it's my lighting. I look like I'm ill. Here, let me just give a little light and see, just to show that I'm not green around the gills. Well, hold on.
I noticed.
Yeah, see, I've got a little color. I'm not really green.
There you go.
It's just the light was coming through. So, all right. I think we're about ready to wind down, but let's have you name your favorites in a couple of categories, and it's probably the tequila, since you were was it tequila that you were, and you were national for Woodford and
North America for Finlandia.
Okay, so give some of, let's start with bourbons, and we'll be sure to put these in the show notes. What are some good, some of your favorite bourbons, whether they're Brown-Forman brands or larger brands or craft distillers? Start with some bourbons for people to taste.
Well, so my immediate go-to is the one that was the best job on the planet, being the national brand manager for Woodford Reserve. Love their Distiller Select, but they offer a wheat-based product. They have master's collections. They have all sorts of different options to pick from. The Woodford Double Oak has become a really favorite of a lot of folks. I'm also a big fan of Old Forester, which is the family's original brand. They've got a whole whiskey series out there that they're taking advantage of the craft trend and doing different expressions of Old Forester, doing marvelous work on that front. Outside of Brown-Forman, I'm a big fan of Peerless, which they offer a bourbon product and a rye-based product, and they do single barrels. They're high proof. Or actually they're barrel proof typically. They're doing some really magnificent work. They're available across the US. There's a distillery out of Danville, Kentucky by the name of Wilderness Trail Distillery that's doing really, really good work. They offer a wheated bourbon, a rye bourbon. They do single barrels. They are selling all over the country as well. So those are a few of the bourbons. I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of my number one client, J.K. Williams Distillery, which we have a wheated bourbon as well as a high rye bourbon. Only available in Illinois today. So sorry, folks. Stay tuned on getting that, getting your hands on that one. So those are a few of my go-tos. And obviously Jack Daniel's offers, which is a great whiskey, and Tennessee whiskey. I mean, I think people don't give that the credit it's due because it's mass produced, but it has a single barrel that's fantastic, has a Gentleman Jack that's fantastic. So I like all the categories in terms of the whiskeys. So, and outside of the bourbon world, if I may, I'm a big fan of Herradura tequila. They make a silver and añejo that have a lot of great flavor. They are very much handcrafted. They are super premium. And then we had a brand called Don Eduardo that's very limited in availability. That's very nice. I think you can't go wrong with Don Julio's real popular out there. So that's some of the better brands there. Rum, we are limited in our rum exposure. I used to represent Appleton Rums out of Jamaica. That's a really good, nice sipping aged rum as well. And I think Bacardi does some different things with, they obviously have their major brands, but then they're starting to do some things with aged bourbons. I'm sorry, rums. But they're actually in the bourbon business too with Angel's Envy. So keep that in mind. That's actually an interesting brand that was created by Lincoln Henderson. Is no longer with us, unfortunately, but he was the originator of Woodford Reserve. He used to work for Brown-Forman. So it's a very close-knit community there. So, I mean, those are probably the categories that I spend the most with. Vodka-wise, vodka is very interesting in that people understand it to be tasteless, odorless. It's really not supposed to deliver a flavor profile. I learned very much that is not true with, again, the sources of flavor, whether it's your water source, how often it's distilled, the grains that you use, because you can make vodka out of it, anything from grapes to potatoes to different grains to wheat. Some of the popular brands out there, like an Absolute, that's made from a wheat grain, so it gives you a different flavor. Stoli, I think, is Stolichnaya is another type of grain. Finlandia was a 6-row barley wheat out of Finland. With glacier water. So vodkas do offer flavors, and I think those who drink martinis know the difference. The thing with vodka is obviously people use it in cocktails, so the flavors are downplayed quite a bit and don't really necessarily come forth in a cocktail. So, but those are some of the vodkas out there that are different and unique. I'm not that familiar with the craft vodka side yet. Still learning there. And then gin-wise, I think Ford's Gin out of London. That's a new Brown-Forman edition. It's basically a bartender's gin. Is one worth trying. It's got a lot of flavor, and there's a lot of innovation going out there with gins as well, which is interesting to watch. All these craft distilleries get involved in gins.
Awesome. That should give people that are into alcohol some interesting evenings to do some tastings. So thank you for that.
Lots of choices. So please enjoy yourself responsibly, I will say.
Awesome. Give us contact information for you and your consultancy, and sort of give us an idea of what your focus is, and your website.
Sure. So to check out Unbridled Spirits Consulting, you can go to unbridledspiritsconsulting.com and see kind of what my capabilities, my experience, a few of my clients that I'm working with right now. I'm fairly new in terms of running my own business, staying very busy. And then, so you can reach me at Nicho, Nicho, at unbridledspiritsconsulting.com. And then, or you can reach me through the website. There's a contact section there. But what I try to do is, bring my passion and experience to help these kind of, what I'll say, up and coming startups, individuals with great passion as well, who want to develop their brands and bring new brands to life, whether it's through developing or acquiring a distillery on their own and developing what it takes to bring a distillery to life. Or I've got clients that have created brands through sourcing and blending the great labels, great flavors, been wildly successful in the early years, in their efforts because they've got a great story. They're authentic. They're transparent in terms of their story. And those kind of folks, I try to help them think about their distribution strategy, their packaging, their brand development, any component of the sales and marketing continuum. I've had experience with, and I can advise, coach, develop strategy. Also, I've done almost everything from building business plans for startup brands to develop consumer relationship marketing programs for those folks. And then also understand sales execution, talk about distribution strategy. What's the right type of accounts that you want to be in to be successful? Who are the right partners? I've met with investors so I've touched the gamut of everything it takes to try to bring a business to life and help these folks bring their vision and passion to life. So I do it in an unbridled way, and it's all about great spirits.
Nick, thanks so much. This has been every bit as interesting as our first conversation. You're a wealth of knowledge, and combining that with your passion for it just is very compelling. So thanks so much for sharing your story. Let's talk over time about bringing you back in, sharing some new brands, and just some more of your passion. So thanks so much for that.
Thank you, Mark, for having me, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share my passion because I've been at it for a long time and really love this business. So thank you again.
So everybody, thanks for joining in. Hope you enjoyed it. You can support the podcast by going on our website, thrivecolivingcommunities.org. We do have a new sponsor, and that's Boxable. And we're even looking into Boxable as possibly a part of Thrive. Boxable, that's at boxable.com. They are creating a technology sort of like Tesla in that they're bringing robotics and rapid iterations and changes to the building industry. They've built a first model that is 20 by 20 feet, and it collapses for transport into an 8-foot and can be pulled by a truck. So we're looking into Boxable as a possible partner and as a way to provide the residences for Thrive. So take a look at that, boxable.com. And if you use our link and buy one, it's 450 square feet, and it's $50,000 plus shipping. So it's an inexpensive and very reasonable and attractive way to have a tiny home. If you use our link, we both get some benefits, Thrive and you. But there are many ways to support the podcast, and they're all listed in the show notes, as is Nico's contact information and some of the brands that he mentioned. So please join us again, and thanks again, Nico, for being a great guest.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcast and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.